The Galactic Council had existed for 12,000 years. It was a collection of 417 species spread across 90,000 star systems. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had witnessed the birth of new civilizations and the death of ancient ones. They believed they understood everything about the universe. They were wrong. In the outer spiral arm of the galaxy, on a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, there existed a species that the Council had discovered 3 centuries ago. The humans. At first, the Council scientists dismissed them as primitive. They had barely achieved flight. They were still burning fossil fuels. They were fighting wars among themselves over invisible lines on their planet's surface. But the eldest among the Council, the ancient Vorthan philosopher named Kalthos, had studied the humans more carefully. He had watched their history unfold through surveillance drones hidden in their asteroid belt. He had seen something that terrified him to his core. Keep them dormant, Kalthos had demanded during the emergency session of the Council. His voice had trembled as he spoke. Do not contact them. Do not trade with them. Do not even let them know we exist. Build a containment field around their solar system if you must. But whatever you do not wake the humans. The younger council members had laughed at the old philosopher. Ambassador Varix of the Crystalline Dominion had been the loudest critic. His species was known for their advanced technology and their pride in their military achievements. They had conquered 30 star systems in their history. They believed no primitive species could threaten them. You speak of these creatures as if they were monsters, Varix had said with amusement dancing in his crystalline eyes. They are barely out of their caves. Their technology is pathetic. Their lifespans are laughably short. What could we possibly fear from such weak beings? Kalthos had stood before the assembly, his ancient body supported by his walking staff. He had lived for 800 years, and in all that time, he had never been so afraid. I have studied every species that has ever achieved spaceflight, he said. I have analyzed their histories, their development patterns, their psychology. The humans are different. They are fundamentally different from anything we have ever encountered. He activated the holographic display and showed them images from human history. Wars, famines, natural disasters, plagues that killed millions. Look at this, Kalthos said. Any other species would have collapsed under these pressures. The Valorian people destroyed themselves after a single nuclear war. The Kreth went extinct from a plague that killed nearly 30% of their population. But the humans, they survived everything. They adapted. They rebuilt. They came back stronger every single time. The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but Varix remained unmoved. Resilience is not the same as strength, he argued. Their military capabilities are negligible. Their ships cannot even leave their own solar system. Not yet, Kalthos replied. But that is precisely my point. Look at the speed of their development. 200 years ago, they were riding animals for transportation. 100 years ago, they achieved powered flight. 50 years ago, they split the atom. 20 years ago, they connected their entire planet through a global information network. Their rate of advancement is unprecedented in galactic history. He paused, letting his words sink in. And there is something else, he continued, something far more concerning. Look at how they think, their art, their stories, their dreams. The display showed images of human creativity, paintings of vast starships, books about galactic empires, films depicting humanity spreading across the stars. They imagine themselves among us, Kalthos said. They dream of reaching the stars before they even know we exist. They write stories about meeting alien species, and in most of those stories, they imagine themselves as equals, sometimes even as superiors. No other pre-contact species has ever demonstrated such ambitious thinking. It is as if they were born knowing their destiny. The debate had lasted for 3 standard cycles. In the end, The vote had been close, but Ambassador Varix and his allies had won. They had decided not only to contact the humans, but to invite them into the galactic community. They had believed it would be a simple matter to control and exploit such a young species. Arrogance had overruled wisdom. The first contact had gone smoothly. The humans had been shocked to learn they were not alone in the universe, but they had adapted with remarkable speed. Within a decade, they had established trade relationships with a dozen species. Within 2 decades, they had reverse-engineered faster-than-light technology that had taken other species centuries to develop. Within 3 decades, they had colonies on 5 different worlds. The Council had watched with growing unease as humanity expanded. They had tried to slow the humans down through trade restrictions and diplomatic pressure. But the humans had simply developed their own alternatives. They had created their own alliances with minor species who felt marginalized by the Council. They had built their own trade networks that bypassed Council regulations. And they kept growing. Faster and faster. 50 years after first contact, the Crystalline Dominion had decided to send a message. They had attacked a human colony world on the edge of Council space. They had expected a quick victory that would remind the humans of their place in the galactic hierarchy. They had been catastrophically wrong. The human response had been unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Within days, the human military had mobilized forces from 30 different star systems. Within weeks, they had counter-invaded 3 crystalline worlds. Within months, they had pushed to the very doorstep of the crystalline home system. But it was not just their military response that had shocked the galaxy. It was the way they fought. The humans did not fight like any other species. They were creative. They were adaptable. They took risks that seemed insane, and somehow those risks paid off. They turned defeat into victory time and time again. The Battle of Velox Prime had become legendary. The human fleet had been outnumbered 5 to 1. Any other species would have retreated, but the human commander had instead charged directly at the enemy flagship. She had rammed her ship into the enemy's shield generator while simultaneously launching boarding parties through the resulting gap. Within hours, she had captured the enemy fleet's command vessel and turned its weapons against its own ships. When asked later how she had conceived such a strategy, the commander had simply shrugged. "We read a lot of stories," she had said. "Someone wrote something like this in a book once. I thought it might work." The Crystalline Dominion had surrendered unconditionally within 8 months of starting the war. It was the fastest conquest in galactic history. Ambassador Varix had been executed by his own people for bringing such disaster upon them. In the aftermath, Kalthos had addressed the Council once again. He was even older now, his body failing, but his mind remained sharp. "I warned you," he said. "I told you to keep them dormant. But you did not listen. You thought you could control them. You thought your technology and your experience would keep you safe. But you failed to understand what the humans truly are." He activated the display one final time. "The humans are not like us," he explained. "We developed in a universe that seemed hostile, but was actually quite gentle. Our evolutionary pressures were mild. Our challenges were manageable. We became comfortable. We became complacent. We built our civilization slowly, carefully, following well-established paths. The display showed images of Earth, a planet of extremes, earthquakes, volcanoes, ice ages, asteroid impacts, mass extinctions. The humans evolved on a death world," Kalthos continued. "A planet that tried to kill them constantly. Everything on their world was dangerous. The weather, the terrain, the other animals, even their own biology worked against them. They are fragile creatures with short lifespans and no natural weapons." He paused for emphasis. "And yet they survived. They survived because they learned to think differently than any other species. They learned to take impossible risks because playing it safe meant certain death. They learned to adapt instantly because the environment changed without warning. They learned to cooperate in vast numbers because individuals could not survive alone. And they learned to never, ever give up because giving up meant extinction. The council chamber was silent. "We made a terrible mistake," Kalthos concluded. "We saw their primitive technology and assumed they were weak. But technology can be acquired. Resources can be gathered. What cannot be easily obtained is the spirit that burns within the human heart, the refusal to accept defeat, the willingness to sacrifice everything for victory, the ability to see obstacles not as barriers but as challenges to overcome." He looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives of 400 species. "The humans were never dormant," he said. "They were simply waiting for the opportunity we foolishly gave them. And now that they are awake, I do not think anything in this galaxy can put them back to sleep." The years that followed proved Kalthos correct. Humanity did not seek revenge for the attack on their colony. They did not pursue conquest for its own sake. Instead, they did something far more remarkable. They began to transform the galaxy itself. Human engineers developed technologies that the council scientists had declared impossible. Human doctors cured diseases that had plagued alien species for millennia. Human diplomats resolved conflicts that had persisted for centuries. Human artists created works that moved beings across hundreds of worlds to tears. But most importantly, humans taught the other species something they had forgotten. They taught them to dream again. They taught them to take risks. They taught them to refuse the comfortable limitations they had accepted for themselves. Within a century, the galaxy was unrecognizable. Poverty had been eliminated on 1,000 worlds. Wars had become rare. Life expectancy had doubled for most species. The old stagnant order had been swept away and replaced with something vibrant and new. Kalthos did not live to see most of these changes. He died shortly after delivering his final speech. But before he passed, a human diplomat had visited him in his final hours. "Why did you try to keep us dormant?" she had asked. "Did you truly fear us so much?" The ancient philosopher had smiled weakly. "I did not fear what you would take from us," he had replied. "I feared what you would give us. I knew that once you arrive, nothing would ever be the same." I was right about that, at least. He had closed his eyes. But perhaps, he had whispered with his final breath, perhaps change was exactly what we needed. The human diplomat had held his hand as he passed. She had then returned to her ship and continued her work of transforming the galaxy, never forgetting the wise old alien who had seen humanity's potential before anyone else. The lesson was carved into the Council's archives as a permanent reminder. It read simply, "Wisdom saw what arrogance ignored." But in the end, even wisdom could not predict all the wonders that would follow when humanity finally woke. The stars themselves seemed brighter now. The galaxy that had once seemed so ancient and tired had found new purpose. And at the center of it all stood humanity, no longer dormant, fully awake, and finally home among the stars where they had always belonged.